There exists a skill that people can acquire, and it can create a whole other dimension of thought that can change a person's life forever. That skill is the ability to make connections and understanding the relationship between powerful individuals, large corporations, governmental entities, and whoever else these people and entities are connected to. This is the ability to look at some practice that, for instance, a corporate grocery store chain is doing, and then recognize that they are working in cooperation with some other entity that puts off the image of being completely separate from that other entity. Here's an example: say at your local corporate chain grocery store, there are pink balloons that are dedicated to victims of the disease measles. Maybe the balloons, colored like that Susan G. Komen cancer charity for example, say "Remember Jane Carter," and that was an inoculated child who passed away after getting the measles. This is a completely fictional scenario, but it gets relevant. So you see these ornaments at your local grocery chain, promoting the idea that a child who didn't receive a vaccination lost her life, and the same story is all over the television media, as they also promote a product purported to prevent the measles. So what does a person with the aforementioned skills necessary to recognize a conspiracy conclude? The obvious conclusion is that there must be either some spoken or unspoken cooperation between the grocery store chain featuring the message, the television news outlets giving so much coverage to the story, and more than likely, the pharmaceutical corporation that would make such a vaccine. Think this is some far-out scenario that could never happen? Go into Walmart and tell me what you see: signs everywhere, in the parking lot and inside, promoting flu vaccines made by the corporations Sanofi or Merck. If people think there is no cooperation between the grocery chain, the pharmaceutical corporations, and the media, they don't know how this world works. When people think it's paranoid to look for conspiracies like this, they fail to understand this is the social architecture of the entire world. When it pertains to power, this is the architecture of power in the world, pure conspiracy. It's so interwoven, how this world works on a top-down level, that one can make a chart out of people who have connections to each other, and other corporations, and it will look something like this. In recent years, charts like that have circulated on the internet. It seems they were made with a certain type of software utilized for mapping out connections between people and corporations. The software is also used by researcher Jan Irvin of Gnostic Media. Articles about charts like this note that the Bilderberg Group is at the center. To be more precise, steering committees like the Bilderberg Group certainly are up there in the upper echelons of power, and the group seems to have a unique spot sitting at the top of the hierarchy. When people start to wake up to the fact that power and wealth are extremely centralized in this world, the Bilderberg Group is one of the most readily available examples of extreme centralized power. The Bilderberg Group combines people of great influence in the media, mainstream media talking heads, with the people who are thought to really deliver high-level orders in this world, people more wealthy and influential than those in high seats of government power. The Rockefellers literally founded the group. It was a result of people like that. Independent researchers like James Corbett have extensively covered the centralized power seated in organizations like the Bilderberg Group, even going as far back as the 1800s to note how the industrial barons basically never lost their power, passing it down onto the creation of new entities in the early 1900s. The robber barons merged with the bankers, and now we have this today. Let's take a 1991 quote from David Rockefeller, to illustrate how serious financial players, intelligence agency people, corporate representatives, big bankers, and politicians all congregate at this annual meeting. The now deceased Rockefeller stated, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time magazine and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries." Rockefeller is famous for his wealth and that of his family, but David in particular is known for his litany of social connections, connections that constitute sturdy, rigid strings of power tied to other individuals and entities like the strings of a puppet. He was a Gemini, he had the connections and that was his role in the dynasty. His brother was vice president under an administration now around 50 years ago, and Rockefeller's protege Henry Kissinger is the man who has been advising every last president, 10 presidents, for 54 years.